voting for this, and I said, you don't know what's in it, you haven't read it, you haven't been around long enough. He said, I know. He says, how can you vote against the Patriot Act? You know, it's the name that said it. You know, if you see the name on a bill in Washington, what's in the bill is almost always the opposite of what the name is. He says, and how could I go home and explain to my constituents that I voted against the Patriot Act right after 9/11? I said, well, but that's your job. Go home and explain it to them. That's what your job is. Called Repeal the Fourth Amendment Act, it wouldn't have passed. Anyway, it sailed right through. But we're suffering the consequences. We gave up an awful lot because now they can look at all our records and no offending search warrants, no going to judges. So we have given up and sacrificed a lot. But it's continuing is the big problem. They never give up. Last week we had a fairly decent victory by stopping SOPA. That the president has just signed that has a lot of the same stuff in there. And let's hope our senators know not to ratify that treaty because it's going to do some of the same things in controlling the internet. The internet is the weapon of liberty as far as I'm concerned. There's a continuous attack on our personal liberties and the undermining of our constitutional protections. Take the National Defense Authorization Act. Anybody ever hear about the problems we have with that? That is the bill that put a provision in there saying that the military now has the authority to arrest any American citizen that happens to be a suspect because he was associated with or was at a meeting or visited a website that he might be involved with terrorism. So, well, sure, there's nothing wrong with looking for suspects and getting proper procedures and getting search warrants and checking things out. But to say that an American citizen can be arrested by the military, which means the posse comitatus will be repealed, and not only that, the individual American citizen can be held indefinitely and denied even to talk to an attorney. That is not the America that I want to live in. Senate, it had gone through the House last summer, and just recently went through the Senate. And there was one provision put in the Senate that says, if you are arrested and they allow you to have a trial and you're found innocent, they still could hold you forever and put you in prison, even if you've been found guilty in a court of law. I mean, this is totally astounding. But there was a certain senator from Kentucky who got that provision removed. That would, if it would be followed, would save us a lot of grief and a lot of suffering. And that is, how do we go to war? This was one of the reasons we had a revolution. This was one of the reasons that they didn't want the king or the executive branch to go to war without permission of the legislative branch, which meant the body closest to the people. And it said that we cannot go to war unless there is a declaration. Can you imagine how many tragedies could have been prevented since World War II if we had just followed that law and said, don't go to war? And that's one thing I absolutely will promise. We will not be going to war at any whim, and it will only be done for national security reasons with a full declaration of war where you declare it, you win it, and you come home. Quite a few battles since World War II that are undeclared, but in the last 10, 12 years, We've been involved constantly, and they're ever expanding. Presidents, candidates promise one thing and they do the other. In the year 2000, the Republicans had a candidate that said we shouldn't be in nation building. We shouldn't be the policemen of the world. We shouldn't be involved in nation building and getting involved in internal affairs. But quickly, after the election, did exactly the opposite. Even Obama spoke more softly about bringing troops home and ending wars, but he's expanding wars. He's into Africa now, various states in Africa. They're talking about going into Syria. They can't wait. There's some in Washington can't wait until they can start a war with the Iranians. So I would say that a change in foreign policy would do a lot of good. It would save a lot of lives. It would save a lot of money, too. We ran up the national debt over $4 trillion because of these wars that are ongoing. And when are they going to end? And right today, there was an announcement by the executives, I don't know whether the president or somebody else, was warning Iran, you better behave or we'll have to come back into this country. We gave you all your freedoms, now you better act up because there's chaos over there. We literally have turned that country over to the Shiites who are allies with the Iranians, who are allies with the Chinese. In all these good intentions and pretenses of why they're over there, sometimes it boils down. It's not too far removed from saying, it's all about oil. You know, thank you. What is the solution now? We're involved over there, and how do we resolve this, and how do we get out of it? I say, just come home. Just bring the troops home. The people in Okinawa said, we're tired of it. Why don't you go home? Why do we have to be in Okinawa? In Japan? Why do we have to be in South Korea? South Korea's GDP is probably 20 times greater than North Korea. And you know, they can take care of themselves. In the same way with Germany, why don't we subsidize their welfare state by providing for their national defense, putting thousands and thousands of soldiers over there, and they spend their money into their economy? I say bring those troops home and let them spend their money in this economy. Or if you do statistical analysis of what the people are most concerned about, they're concerned about the economy and jobs, and they should be. But what they have to understand is how we got into this mess, because if we continue to do the same things that got us into the mess as a solution, it's not going to work. We got into this mess because government's too big, they spend too much money, they tax too much, they borrow too much, they print too much money, they were too much involved in fixing the interest rates and manipulating the economy. So we get into the crisis, and it was predictable. The bubbles were readily apparent. We saw the housing bubble there, and the housing bubble burst. So what are they doing? They're spending more money, they're printing more money, they're regulating more, and then they wonder why it's not getting any better. Because they have to, when you get into trouble like this, what you have to do is allow corrections to come. The market says there's too much debt and too much overbuilding. Well, you have to pause, you have to liquidate debt, and you have to get supply and demand back in balance. And we're not doing this. But instead of allowing the debt to be liquidated and wiped off the books, where the big debt was on the financial markets, the Fannie Mae's and the Freddie Mac's and the mortgage companies and the banks that were into the derivatives business, they were all going bankrupt. They said, once again, build up fear in the hearts of all the people. You know, we're going to have a depression. We're going to have a depression. We have to bail them out. So what did they do? The Congress passed TARP funds. The Fed got involved in $15 trillion worth of credits. And what happened to the debt? It wasn't liquidated. The debt was bought from the people who had made all the money. They got bailed out. The debt was dumped on us, the middle class. And the middle class lost their jobs. The middle class shrinks. They're getting poorer, and they lost their houses. This is upside down. You know, and some people come conclude, and I think I mentioned this a little bit in the debate last night about, well, what the solution is just tax the rich. You know, people who are rich, if you tax them, we can solve all